Here with John C. McGinley from Ground Floor. Now, I have to ask you about this double-edged sword. I feel like when you come off a show that's as successful as Scrubs and everybody knows you as Perry Cox, it's great to have a successful show, but you sort of feel like, oh, that's the guy from Scrubs.
Well, I had very happily, my glass was full from Scrubs as far as doing episodic TV. So I segued into doing a Broadway play with Al Pacino, and then I got to do 42, the Jackie Robinson story, and then I had a thing on Burn Notice, and I did Alex Cross, and was segueing back into, was transitioning back into doing films, which I've done 70 of. I've been lucky enough to do 70, and that felt really good. And so when the opportunity came along to do Ground Floor, and the executive producer who invented Scrubs came and offered it to me, I turned it down. And then he seduced me. He made it so that it was something I really, really wanted to do. And I'm so glad he changed my mind, because the show is astonishing.
You kind of have like trademarked this tough love sort of like mentor. There was Cox on Scrubs, and now there's like Remington Mansfield on Ground Floor. What is it about that kind of like tough love mentoring kind of role that speaks to you?
I don't know. I guess it's something that maybe I was exposed to, and maybe that's the love delivery system that was in my life impacted me in such a way that I can then take that and lend it to characters who are trying to chart through this universe of when to love and when not to love. And so Mansfield is very different than Cox, in as much as Cox was the most reluctant, dysfunctional mentor in the history of television, and Mansfield is more than a mentor. He wants to father Skyler's character emotionally and spiritually. And so that was a real separator for me when we were creating Mansfield, to move him away from Cox.
Do you find that you're mentoring the younger actors on set as well, given all your experience, all these movies that you've done, or does that not really come into play anymore?
It doesn't really come into play, because this ensemble, from Skyler, who did Pitch Perfect and was in a Broadway musical, Spring Awakening, that won a Tony, and so this ensemble, this group is so skilled and experienced for being so young, that hasn't, the mentoring thing and being kind of everybody's daddy on set, it doesn't resonate on our set.
What is it about Ground Floor that spoke to you?
I thought it was relevant and fresh, and the study of class culture and class conflict, I think, is one of the most relevant things in 2013. I loved that that it was grounded in one esoteric argument, that my character says it's more valuable to work 90 hours a week until you're 40, and then maybe you have a chance to live the life you want, which is what he got to do. And then the female janitor, Briga's character, says, yeah, but we get off every day at 5. And the fact of the matter is, yeah, but you have no pension at 65, and you have nothing. So those two, and the show does not pretend to provide an answer to that, which is better. So those two sensibilities, those economic and socio-economic sensibilities, are voiced underneath it, and it pins the show it establishes it, it grounds it in some kind of context, that there are two different ways to live your life, which is more appropriate, and they're trying to pull this kid, like, I'm going to tug of war with Skyler in the middle, and that feels good to use that as the point of demarcation. That's where it's coming from is great.
I found that, like, for an ensemble comedy to work, there has to be a lot of chemistry with the cast, and I find that that spoke in volumes in the pilot. Between, like, you and Skyler, between Skyler and Briga. Was that chemistry present right from the first table read?
Yes, and that's completely luck, because the actors can't really generate that. Because the lens is like an X-ray machine. It sees through all that. And so that stuff, that everybody got on the same frequency from go. Mm-hmm. And it happened on Scrubs, too. It happened on Glengarry. Every once in a while, that stuff, you catch that stuff.
It's in a bottle.
You can't manufacture it. When you manufacture it, it comes out disingenuous. And we got lucky.
Why do you think that there's always been this disparity between the top floor and the ground floor, the sort of guys in suits and then the ones that put them there?
Well, I don't know. It's as old as haves and have-nots. That's why I think the show has a chance to speak to a wide demographic. That all of us have been on one side or the other of being either on the top floor or the ground floor, and that it goes as far back as Romeo and Juliet when they can't be together. West Side Story, upstairs, downstairs. Those are sensibilities that are rife for drama and comedy, and so this is set in those two sensibilities, the top floor and the ground floor, and our protagonist falls in love with a female janitor, and they cannot be in love because her people are not going to let her go out with some stockbroker, and the stockbroker's people are damn sure not going to let him go out with some female janitor. And of course, that begs the question, why not? And so the answer to that is there's 1,000 answers to it. And so that's what the show explores.
Do you think that it's sort of like a modern-day Romeo and Juliet with Skylar's character? You know, with Skylar and Brigga, like, is it sort of like they can't be together? I sort of find that it's like a 2013 version of like this romance that can't be.
I think you put your finger right on it. Mm-hmm. And how great to use that as a template. How great to borrow from that. Yeah,
it's like Sons of Anarchy does that with, like, you know, maybe this is the new way of writing.
It grounds it in quality material. I mean, so yeah, I hope the writers continue to massage that classic kind of texture that you get from Romeo and Juliet and from West Side Story. And I only say West Side Story because obviously it is Romeo and Juliet, but the actors are so talented in the ensemble, not myself, but musically there's a component that is now musical component that now seems to be visiting each episode. And it's because Brigga and Skylar and Renee, these guys can sing like sparrows. They're unbelievable. And so that's been, the writers have used that asset that the actors have, and it's great.
You know, I talked a little bit about your sort of like tough love kind of mentor role. The other thing I've noticed is you have a lot of experience with these office kind of settings. You know, there was Office Space, the Broadway of Glengarry Glen Ross, now this one.
Wall Street.
Yeah, Wall Street too. You know, so do you prefer the office setting in comedy or in drama?
Oh, I don't care. As long as there's some story that we're telling and everybody's on the same page and we're all telling the same story. The only drag wherever you are is when you get on the set or on the stage or on a TV set and everybody's not on the same page, and then you find people telling different stories and different styles, and it's a train wreck.
I read a great story about how you landed the role of Red Barber in 42. Apparently, that was a role you really wanted.
I did. I could. For some reason, the casting person wouldn't let me come in because he or she didn't see me for the role, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And so the writer-director Brian Haugelin lived up the driveway and 2 houses down. So I went over to his gate and I rang it, and I totally jumped the chain of command with the casting person. So they're never gonna have me audition for anything ever again.
But you got what you wanted.
But I got what I wanted. So it was pretty great.
I saw the trailer for Kid Cannabis. I am dying to see this movie. Tell me what this movie is about, because this does not seem like a John C. McGinley kind of role.
Kid Cannabis is about 2 young men who back in the 70s or 80s started to walk marijuana down from Canada to Washington. And they got good at it. And it was a very porous border back then. Maybe it still is, I don't know. And they would walk bundles of marijuana over the border, and that's what the film's about. And I play a pot grower. I play the pot grower up in Canada, and we went to a real growery where we shot at this growery where all this marijuana was, and you get high just going in and breathing. It was insane. It's a big greenhouse.
Yeah.
With the
literally.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was no joke. There's rows and rows of marijuana, and it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I would have liked to have a break on set that day.
Oh, man.
What is it like working with Bill Lawrence again?
It's kind of like just putting a glove on. When you spend 9 years with someone and you work 16 hours a day, obviously you spend more time with them than you do your family. And that's a good thing because you have a job, and it wouldn't be on unless it was a hit. And so 9 years with somebody that becomes your family, and so it feels like being reunited with family. And Billy's kind of the Norman Lear of his generation. He's so prolific and he's so gifted at writing comedy that if I ever was going to come back and do a show, it always would have been with Billy.
You know, Ground Floor premieres on Comedy Network November 14th. Why should people watch this show?
Because it's the best comedy on TV this year.
I love when people just say it without even like thinking.
It is. It's the best comedy on TV. I read every single pilot, and it's the best comedy on TV this year.
I love it. John C. McGinley, thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.